passing motorist, likely getting the shock of his life. A discovery that led to this large police presence on the Southern State Parkway. All they know is that someone was driving by when something in the woods caught his eye.
Ruiz said he and his friends were brought to the park by Escobar to smoke pot. But when they got there, about a dozen MS-13 gang members appeared and ordered everyone onto the ground. Ruiz ran for his life. His 4 friends were murdered. Prosecutors say Ruiz pretended to be part of MS-13 in social media posts, which the gang sees as a sign of disrespect punishable by death.
It's the late night of April 12, 2017. Police in Icelip, Long Island, responded to a call of human remains off the road in a wooded area behind a park in Central Islip, a neighborhood of New York City that in recent years had become the battleground to a brutal street takeover by Mara-Salvatrucha, or MS-13, a Salvadoran street gang formed in Los Angeles decades prior. Since 2010, the gang had begun stamping a presence on the rough neighborhood of Central Islip, a majority Hispanic community of about 35,000 residents in the area. Police approached the bodies to see the scene of 4 men, all murdered with an array of blunt and sharp weapons, beaten indiscriminately and brutally. Unfortunately, this was no unordinary scene in Long Island. MS-13 had been at war with rival local gangs, namely with Barrio 18, a gang conflict that has led to the deaths of thousands over the years in both the US and in Latin America, and the death of an innocent 29-year-old Icelip man who happened to be wearing the wrong piece of clothing at the wrong place and wrong time. Back in 2016, 2 high school girls, Kayla Cuevas and Nisa Mickens, were targeted by MS-13 members and brutally beaten to death in the streets with an array of the same weapons, machetes and bats, and left to be found the next morning. A month after the double homicide, a 15-year-old member of Barrio 18 was killed in Calmeadow Park, beaten with machetes by a group of MS-13 gangsters. Only 3 days after that, a man was hacked to death on a neighborhood street in Brentwood, but the bodies of the 4 young men dumped out in the open was a shocking discovery. The 4, 20-year-old Michael Lopez Benegas, 18-year-old Jorge Tiguer, 18-year-old Jefferson Villalobos, and 16-year-old Justin Yevicura had gone missing the night prior, lured out to a park in Icelip by 17-year-old Lenise Escobar and her friend 16-year-old Kaylee Gomez, who tricked the 4 into thinking they were going to smoke marijuana. In the dark of night, the 4 were ambushed by a squad of a dozen machete-wielding gangsters who hacked them to death, quote, in a horrific frenzy of violence. The 4, however, weren't rivals, nor were they a part of any gangland activity in Long Island. They'd been swept up in the violent Long Island underworld, a dark part of New York society populated with struggling drug addicts and the dealers who serve them, all as a result of a simple Instagram post that was taken as disrespect by the gang. This is the MS-13 takeover of Long Island.
The Roosevelt Preserve?
What we have found are human remains.
Police say the bodies found last year were also victims of MS-13, but they believe the killing has stopped as they work to take down members of this gang.
Mara-Salvatrucha, or MS-13, formed in the 1980s in Los Angeles when Salvadoran immigrants moved into the area during the era of the Salvadoran Civil War. A violent coup started in October of 1979 by the Soviet-backed FMLN army, who went against the US-backed government of El Salvador. Young immigrants in the Los Angeles neighborhoods of Pico Union, Rampart, and Westlake began to come together, mostly to keep each other safe from other gangs and listen to heavy metal, while many of them openly adhered to Satanism. This began to set the stage for MS-13, which formed when other established gangs like Clanton 14, a Mexican street gang, began to harass the Salvadorans. They began to take a defensive, and soon enough, this spiraled into full-blown gang warfare. The satanic influence of the gang's early stages can still be seen today in their tattoos, hand symbols, nicknames, and general practices of violence.
is 18th Street. They see each other, they kill each other.
We don't get along with MS, no, MS, you know. We don't like that hood, you know.
Monkey is an 18th Streeter deported from Hollywood a few years ago. He now hangs out in this Honduran neighborhood with an 18th Street clique called Johnson, or as they say it, Johnson.
Ernesto Deras, a former member of the Salvadoran Special Forces, had joined the army at 16 in 1986, but 3 years later was wounded in combat and allowed asylum in the US. He settled in Los Angeles, where the Salvadoran diaspora was heavy. He enjoyed fighting, and within a year of coming to LA, he'd become the head of a 100-man MS-13 clique on Fulton Street. His crew led a wave of terror on the area, going up against several rival gangs using their weapons of choice: machetes, axes, and for Deras, satanic curses. Their sheer level of brutality, inspired by their occult practices, was commonplace among members of MS-13 who usually swarmed their victims in a mob and beat them to death. Deras left the gang before the turn of the century, but not before causing damage in the area. In 1990, Barrio 18, a longer established street gang in LA, came into conflict with MS-13 for unknown reasons, and the two gangs started a bloody conflict where murders became indiscriminate and simply done in the name of gang allegiance. Starting in 1992, members of both Barrio 18 and MS-13 were deported back to El Salvador at the conclusion of the Civil War, and with them came a new civil war. Gang death squads hit the streets of Central America as the two continued their fighting down south. Over the last 3 decades, this street war has turned Central America into the world's bloodiest region. Tattoos in MS-13 are relatively common. Many members of the gang signal the clique they belong to using them. In Long Island, New York, 2 of these cliques included the Sailors Locos West Side clique and the Hollywood Locos clique. Long Island is no stranger to gangland activity. For years, the area has been plagued by gangs ranging from small local drug dealers to members of the Bloods, Barrio 18, and mafia drug crews, who all use the region to sell oxycodone, dope, and coke, and oftentimes as a burial ground for whoever gets in their way. The Sailors clique operated in the neighborhoods of Central Islip and Brentwood, and was led by brothers Jairo Sayans, nicknamed Funny, and Alexi Sayans, nicknamed Blasty. The gang was run out of Alexi Sayans' home in Central Islip, and in order to finance the gang, the Sailors clique obtained shipments of Central American cocaine and passed it down to members of their gang to sell across Brentwood and Islip. The Hollywood clique was run in Roosevelt, a town 40 minutes away, led by Kevin Torres. The profits made from their drug sales were wired to MS-13 leaders in Central America and used to buy weapons to keep their enterprise running. In 2016 and 2017, an uptick in brutal violence in the region came as a result of the brothers trying to take over the area's drug rackets. This meant torturing, raping, and killing anyone they could who was associated with the Bloods, Barrio 18, and the Brentwood Goon Squad. On the evening of January 28, 2016, Alexi Sayans spotted a 29-year-old man named Michael Johnson, an alleged member of the Bloods gang, at the Jocarena Deli in Brentwood, and formed a plot to kill him. Alexi lured Johnson out to the woods that night to smoke marijuana when Jairo and several others ambushed him from behind and stabbed and chopped him to death with a machete. On February 2nd, 2016, a man walking through the woods came across the brutal scene and contacted 911. In April of 2016, in a meeting at Alexi Sayans' home, it was agreed that a former member of their gang, 19-year-old Oscar Acosta, would have to be killed after associating with members of Barrio 18. The men agreed on who would act out what role in the murder plot. On the night of April 29, 2016, a small group of MS-13 members met Acosta in the woods in Brentwood to smoke marijuana when they jumped him with heavy tree branches, tied him up, and loaded him into Alexi and Jairo Sayans' pickup truck. They drove Acosta, conscious and alive, to a woodland area near the Pilgrim State Psychiatric Hospital, an abandoned mental institution off Sagtico State Parkway, where they used machetes to chop him up and buried his lacerated body in the woods. It wouldn't be until September 16 when police discovered his shallow grave while, ironically, searching for a different body of an MS-13 victim. On the night of May 21st, 2016, using their general modus operandi, the Sailors Clique planned to murder Barrio 18 member Karen Pineda and worked with the Hollywood Clique to do it. That night, Pineda was lured out to the woods while Kevin Torres, Victor Lopez Morales, and David Sosa Guevara stood by as lookouts. Pineda entered the woods when he was swarmed by a group of rivals who used machetes to hack him to death and buried in a pre-dug hole. On the night of September 4, 2016, a meeting was held at the Scions' home where it was decided that they'd begin going out actively on the hunt for rival gangsters instead of just killing them when they came across them. The men got into several cars and began patrolling Central Islip when Alexei Scions saw 27-year-old Marcus Bohannon, an alleged member of the Bloods, walking in the early hours of September 5th. Two clique members walked up to him and shot him 9 times, killing him right there in the street. That same night, about 40 minutes away in Roosevelt, Hollywood Clique members Carlos Alfaro, Jose Moises Blanco, Oseas Gonzalez, and Victor Lopez Morales lured Barrio 18 member Josue Amaya Leonor to the Roosevelt Preserve Park to smoke when, like the last murders, he was chopped up with machetes and buried in a deep hole. A week later, the sailors were out on the hunt again, looking for other rivals. This time, 15-year-old Nisa Mickens and 16-year-old Kayla Cuevas. The two girls, not a part of a gang, had gotten into several fights at Brentwood High School with other students, young members of MS-13 online, which eventually led to a confrontation in real life. After the fight, the Scions brothers greenlit killing the two girls. On the night of September 13, 2016, while on the hunt for rivals, Sailors Clique member Selvin Chavez was driving a car with 19-year-old Enrique Portillo and 2 high school members of the gang when they spotted and recognized the girls walking on Staley Street, a neighborhood road where Cuevas lived. Portillo called one of the Scions brothers and got permission to kill them. Chavez drove up by them while Portillo and the other 2 chased the pair with bats and a machete. Mickens was struck in the back of the head with a bat and in the face with a machete, beaten with both weapons, while Cuevas was struck in the head with a bat and across her body with a machete. The 3 killers then retreated to the car and they left with the Scions brothers to the Central Islip home, changed clothes, and hid the murder weapons. In the fallout of the slaying, Kayla Cuevas' mother, Evelyn Rodriguez, became an anti-gang activist and was even invited to the 2018 State of the Union, where the issue of gangs moving across the US border was discussed.
Struggling communities, especially immigrant communities. Evelyn, Elizabeth, Freddie, and Robert, tonight everyone in this chamber is praying for you. Everyone in America is grieving for you. Please stand. Thank you very much. Tonight I am calling on Congress to finally close the deadly loopholes that have allowed MS-13 and other criminal gangs to break into our country.
On the morning of September 14, 2018, 2 years after her daughter was killed, Rodriguez was at the site of her memorial on Staley Street when she saw a local resident, Anne-Marie Drago, defacing the memorial and stealing items from it before attempting to flee. Drago lived in the home behind where the 2 girls had been killed and was upset that the memorial was on the sidewalk in front of her. Rodriguez got in front of the car in an attempt to stop her from leaving before Drago ran over and killed her. Anne-Marie Drago was sentenced to probation after an overturned 9-month prison sentence. On the night of October 10, 2016, Torres and the Scions brothers ordered the murder of 15-year-old Javier Castillo, a member of the Barrio 18 gang. Torres stood in Cow Meadow Park as a lookout while Jairo Scions led Castillo to the park to smoke marijuana. And then, Jairo, Alexi, and others took turns swinging a machete at their victim and buried him in the marsh. 3 days later, 34-year-old Dewan Stacks was walking through a neighborhood in Brentwood when he was ambushed by the Sayans brothers. Alexei stayed around as a lookout as Jairo drove 3 men towards Dewan. The 3 then jumped out of the car, one wielding a bat and 2 wielding machetes, and brutally hacked Stacks to death in the road. The beating was so brutal that he was almost unrecognizable the following morning. It was reported afterwards that they only believed he was a member of the Bloods, but he was actually an innocent civilian. The final murder tied to the Sayans brothers took place in the early morning hours of January 30, 2017, when Alexei Sayans and 2 others were at El Campesino Deli, a deli in Central Islip, and spotted an innocent man, 29-year-old Esteban Alvarado Bonilla, wearing a football jersey that had the number 18 on it.
Investigate a suspected gang killing in a deli. A clerk was also wounded. CBS 2's Tracy Carrasco with the story now from Central Islip.
Detectives scoured the crime scene outside the El Campesino Deli on Caleb's Path, searching dumpsters and sewer drains for the gun used to shoot and kill a man who had just entered the store.
At the hospital, the male victim was pronounced dead. His name is being withheld pending notification of his family. At this point, we do believe that the shooting victim was targeted.
Alexei took that to mean that Bonilla was a member of Barrio 18 and plotted to kill him that same morning. Jairo drove a group of gangsters, Jose Suarez, Kevin Cifuentes, and Mario Aguilar Lopez, to get a mask and a car, while Alexei got a 9mm handgun, and they got together that same morning. Suarez drove Cifuentes and Aguilar Lopez to the deli and waited in the parking lot. Cifuentes entered, posing as a bystander to scope out the place and ensure everything went according to plan. Then, Aguilar Lopez, donning a mask, ran inside and shot Alvarado Bonilla so many times in the head that one of the bullets flew out the other side and hit a female cashier in the process, but she survived as the trio fled. The open and unashamed brutality of the Sayans brothers would be the thing that eventually led to their downfall. The Sailors Clique takeover of Central Islip came to an end in the early hours of March 2nd, 2017, when police in Long Island led raids on the homes of the MS-13 members, arresting 13 men, 10 of whom were illegal immigrants. The Sayans brothers were charged with their involvement in 8 murders between 2016 and the beginning of 2017, and with the help of Cifuentes becoming an informant in exchange for protection, were charged with killing Esteban Alvarado Bonilla. Enrique Portillo, one of the 10 undocumented immigrants, pleaded guilty to the murders of Mickens and Cuevas, apologized to the court, and stated in Spanish, to add to the record, that he never became an informant. Alexei and Jairo Sayans were both charged for their roles in the 8 murders and pleaded guilty in 2025. Throughout his trial, while waiting for court dates in prison, Alexei was engaged in gang activity, smuggling phones in, carrying shanks, and getting into fights with rival inmates. He told the court during his sentencing, through a translator, quote, "I know my apology will not repair the harm and pain that I have caused. I know many of you do not accept my apology, but I want to say from the bottom of my heart that these words are sincere." He didn't look the families of his victims in the eyes during his trial, and in July of 2025, a 30-year-old Alexei Sayans received 68 years in prison.
The prosecution says most of his victims were innocent, like Alvarado's daughter. She brought her ashes with her as she made her emotional plea for justice.
Strong and solid so that I can talk for her.
Last year, Sayans pleaded guilty for his role in the murder. The case prompted President Donald Trump to make several visits to Long Island during his first term in the White House. In court, Sayans apologized to the families of his victims, but none accepted it, like the father of Michael Johnson.
You heard me tell him, look at me. His face is to the floor. No, look at me. He's learned nothing.
Following the takedown of the Sailor Locos Salvatrucha's West Side Clique in March of 2017, an organization by the name of the Guanacos Lil Psychos Salvatrucha's Clique became the dominant MS-13 cell in Central Islip, which now brings us back to the beginning of the video, April of 2017. 5 young men, Michael Lopez Benegas, Jorge Tigre, Jefferson Villalobos, Justin Yivicura, and Elmer Alexander Arteaga Ruiz, had been discussing on Facebook Messenger for some time on how to join MS-13. Villalobos wasn't a resident of Long Island, but rather of Florida, and had been up north visiting his cousin Benegas and his grandmother for Easter. Ruiz, who'd been arrested in March of that year for possessing marijuana, had been spearheading, talking about joining MS-13 to the other 4 men, with Jorge Tigre even saying, quote, "I'll do it." However, they were nothing more than young men enamored by the lifestyle of local gangsters. Ruiz eventually posted an image to his social media in which he and another member of the 5 made MS-13 gang signs and wore MS-13 inspired outfits. The post was simply made to look bad and attract girls, but it was also seen by then 17-year-old Lenise Escobar, nicknamed Diablita, or Little Devil. She was the girlfriend of MS-13 member Jeffrey Amador, nicknamed Cruel, who had a high standing within the Guanacos Lil Psychos clique. Her ex-boyfriend, Sergio Vladimir Segovia Pineda, nicknamed Terrible, was also an active member of the clique. Escobar then showed the post to Amador and told him that the gang was being overrun by rivals. This caused a stir to form within the clique, and the post was shown around. It was then agreed that they would kill the 5 for what they viewed as pure disrespect towards the gang, taking their symbols, acting like they were a part of them, just to get women without putting in the work of actually being a gangster. On the night of April 11, 2017, Lenise Escobar and her friend, 16-year-old Kaylee Gomez, then lured the 5 men out to a park in Central Islip, playing on their desire to hang out with girls. They drove them to the park under the pretense of smoking marijuana, but as they all hung out in a small woodland patch behind the park, the attack began. A dozen or so men, including Sergio Pineda, Josue Portillo, Omar Antonio Villalta, who was nicknamed Anticristo, or Antichrist, Edwin Rodriguez, and a few others, were hiding behind a metal fence that had a hole in it. Villalta began passing around weapons, including a knife to Rodriguez, a chisel to Sergio Pineda, and an axe, machete, and large tree stems. Escobar then sent a text telling them it was time to strike. The men swarmed the group of 5 while the 2 girls watched and commanded them to get on their knees and told them that if they moved, they were dead. Ruiz panicked, got up, and ran for his life. He hopped a fence and a stone wall as he heard someone yelling to chase him when the carnage began. Over the next few minutes, the 12 gangsters ran after and brutally attacked the 4 remaining victims, striking them on the ground, beating them, and killing them. They then dragged them deeper into the woods, put the bodies in a pile, and left the area. One of the victims during the killings had grabbed at Escobar, leaving his blood on her, which she allegedly licked off and swallowed. The 2 women allegedly smiled when the final victim, Michael Lopez Benegas, was stabbed to death by Rodriguez and Sergio Pineda. By the end of the night, 4 innocent men were dead. In the following few days, things began falling apart quickly for the local MS-13 gangsters. Escobar destroyed evidence of that night, getting rid of her bloody sweatshirt and throwing her phone out of a moving car, which, unknown to her, was being followed by police. Her alibi that night was that she and Gomez had been robbed at the same park. She also called Amador and told him over the phone that the 4 men had taken a train, had seen the light, and would never come back. She added that, quote, "But one of them managed to still be here on the map. He knows stuff about me." She also added that she was happy the murders had happened. The following night, the bodies were discovered in the woods by a passerby, so disfigured that they couldn't be recognized, and police began an investigation. Rodriguez, then 17, fled to El Salvador, where he was born, while Villalta ran away to Charlottesville, Virginia, where members of the Guanacos Los Psychos clique operated. One of them worked at a pizzeria and got Villalta a job there. In July of 2017, his co-worker, Marvin Rivera Guevara, flashed him a Barrio 18 hand signal, and Villalta reported to his higher-ups that Guevara was a rival. In the latter hours of July 3rd, 2017, Villalta and the MS-13 member who worked at the pizzeria lured Guevara to the woods to smoke marijuana, where they held him at gunpoint, led him deeper into the woods, and beat him with a machete. They then threw him off a bridge into a river. police in Long Island, in coordination with the FBI and the Department of Justice, began to investigate the slayings in the area. On July 19, 2017, 3 months later, 15 members of MS-13, including Vialta, were rounded up and charged with killing the 4 men, and in Vialta's case, with killing Guevara. All but Rodriguez were caught up in the sweep, who remained in El Salvador until an Interpol notice got him caught in August of 2019 and extradited to the US in 2022. At the beginning of the trial against Liniz Escobar in 2022, Kaylee Gomez, Sergio Vladimir Pineda, and Jeffrey Amador all flipped to the state and testified against her and the rest of the gang about the night of the killing.
Dr. Michael Kaplan, the head pathologist that worked with the Suffolk County Office of the Medical Examiner in 2017, also testified and gave some gruesome details on the injuries that he observed on the 4 men, including blunt force and sharp object injuries on all of their heads. A photo was shown in court of the bloodied bodies found close together. Dr. Kaplan was responsible for doing the autopsies on Justin Livacura and Jefferson Villalobos. He claims their extensive injuries were the worst out of the 4 men. He says they also found evidence of very recent marijuana use in the 2 men. As News 12 has reported, Escobar allegedly helped get the men into the woods by offering them pot. The sole survivor of the attack, Alexander Ruiz, testified last week that the gang ordered all of the men onto the ground in the park, and Ruiz ran for his life.
Escobar's phone conversation, in which she bragged about the 4 deaths, was played to the court. Her defense team attempted to paint it as though she didn't know the killings would happen and was afraid of the gang, but the court sided against her. In 2024, Josu Portillo received 55 years in prison, Escobar received 50 years after a 4-week-long trial, and Rodriguez, as a part of his plea agreement, would be charged as an adult despite committing the crime as a 17-year-old, and received 50 years with a concurrent deportation order following his release. In 2025, Vialta received 55 years for multiple homicides.
The violent gang already claimed 11 young lives within the last year. 2 weeks ago, 4 young men were found brutally beaten in this Central Islip park.